Welcome to Relentless Pursuit with Marjorie Dudley. Real conversations with entrepreneurs, business owners, and leaders who refuse to settle. This isn't about overnight success. It's about the decisions, discipline, setbacks, and standards that shape extraordinary results. If you're building something that matters, you're in the right place.
Hello and welcome to Relentless Pursuit with Marjorie Dudley. I am very excited today for our guest, Jamie Hamer. He is the co-founder and commercial leader of LOXA. Did I say that correctly?
Yep, spot on.
Awesome. And he is an Insurtech focused on insurance at the point of sale. Formerly an exited founder and enterprise salesperson and sales leader from a variety of large businesses, including Gartner and Procter Gamble. And of course, like many of or several of my guests, he sold books door to door. We should have that in common. Jamie, welcome to the show. I am so glad to have you on today.
Thanks, Marjorie. I'm really excited, and yeah, we're both a bit mad, which is great.
I think so. And the theme obviously is relentless pursuit. And I'm always inspired by entrepreneurs, leaders, business owners who are relentlessly pursuing their goals and their dreams. And it's always fascinated me. I've been in coaching 20 years, and it's always fascinated me that the best of the best continue pursuing their goals in spite of obstacles and challenges and bumps along the way. And you've had quite a few of those yourself. One of the big ones that you're open with talking about today is you've struggled with addiction over the years. And because that's sometimes considered a taboo topic, I'm so grateful that you're open to share a little bit about that journey and make it a little less taboo, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks, Marjorie. I am engaged to a clinical psychologist who's worked with people who would have more stereotypically disabling addiction issues than I have had. I've managed to be highly functioning and a top performer everywhere despite various addictions. But I think it is something that has had a huge effect on my life, mostly negative, and very happy to be open about it. So fundamentally, I think what I understand addiction to be, after a fair amount of therapy and talking about these with a lot of people, is avoiding pain through distracting yourself. And that's emotional pain, that's dealing with your feelings, that's dealing with historical uncomfortableness, anxiety, guilt, shame, all these different emotions that you physically feel and that drive you to say, all right, I need a distraction. And so that distraction for me has taken a lot of different forms throughout my life. And it's only recently I've been acknowledging that and tackling them and actually dealing with the emotions as opposed to just pressing on. So I think there's been this when early in my life when I first started realizing that I had these pains and that there could be distractions to them, I was heavily addicted to pornography, which I think is one of the worst addictions because it affects
and another very taboo topic for a lot of folks.
But I think it's important to talk about because it's so easily accessible nowadays. The statistics on watching and
scary accessible.
And the statistics are crazy, and it's just a hugely unrealistic expectation of sex and sexuality. And so that is one of the things that I realized the fastest, and by the fastest about 10 years, was really a bad addiction, a really terrible addiction to have. And so managed to phase that out over time with some help from coaching, with some help from therapy. But that was just the first in a number of addictions, including some addictions to things like that people don't always consider bad, like sex or hard work. Our summers, I don't know why everyone else or what drove everyone else to go door to door for 80 hours a week, but mine was driven by an avoidance of pain and a fear of failure, and that I had to do this to succeed. So in that way, knocking on doors and taking rejections became an addiction, despite it being my biggest fear. And that obviously, that or sex as a male, those are kind of looked on as positive things by society. But I would argue they were addictions that were ways of me distracting myself from how I actually felt more than anything.
Dealing, from coping, from feeling the feelings. And things.
Exactly. From not having to sit there sober by yourself, figuring out who you are, who you want to be, and how you feel about some of the things that have happened and some of the way you behave historically. And it can be a bit of a vicious cycle, right? You feel even worse because you've drunk the night before, and I was heavily addicted to alcohol for 20 years. you feel guilty about that, and you're also hungover and dehydrated and having a physical withdrawal from not having alcohol. And the logical thing is to numb that pain again by drinking again.
Yeah. Was it? How did you discover for any of those? How did you discover that it was truly an addiction and not just a trait or a habit? Like, was it outward or was it inward? Were you feeling certain things? Were you noticing certain things? Did someone come to you and as a friend, or like, where did the scales tip where you go, this is no longer okay for me to continue on this path?
Yeah, I'm lucky because I've always, well, not always at all, but like I came to the realization over time, sometimes a lot earlier than actually giving up the thing in question, that it wasn't like congruent with the way I see myself, or that this wasn't a part of me I liked. I never liked the drunk Jamie. I never liked the porn addicted Jamie. I never liked the Jamie who needed to go out for a cigarette or a vape or whatever it is. So there was always that cognitive dissonance telling me it was wrong, and eventually that became motivating enough. But I think the difference between an addiction and just a habit is whether it's compulsive, whether it's something you feel like you have to do, even though you don't want to do it.
Oh.
So fundamentally, I did not want to drink all the time and be hungover. And fundamentally, I did not want to vape, which is a habit I've only recently given up. But like, and obviously you replace these habits with other habits unless you deal with your feelings. And since I was doing these things, despite it being, knowing at the back of my mind and in my gut that this wasn't who I am, this is not who I want to be, that's how I define it as an addiction. And eventually that strength of feeling with support from other people, with making those habits less available, those that become addictions, I've been able to give the vast majority of them up.
I think that's really interesting that you, and again, this is common with high performers, they know who they want to be, and that you're crediting that this is not who I am. This habit over here is not who I am. And so I'm wondering out loud, just in real time, did that high performance mentality, do you think that helped you, that clarity, do you think it helped you separate from the addiction possibly more easily or more readily or more decisively? Was that a piece of it, being so sure in who you wanted to become and who you were already?
Yeah, I think there's two elements to that. One is getting clear on what your values are so that you can... Yes. I have my values right here. I recognize some people won't be able to see this, but it's values and affirmations that go against them. A lot of credit goes to Southwestern Consulting and Dave Brown, who I worked with for this sort of thing, as well as taking the time to be like, what do I actually value in myself and in other people? So I've got continual improvement, having a long-term vision, generosity to others, open-mindedness, my physical and mental health, maintaining my integrity, having an abundant mindset, like believing things will always get better and there's enough of everything to go around to not have to be political, and connection, looking for deeper connection with other people.
Those.
Now, drinking alcohol does not fit into any of those. So I don't drink alcohol.
Right.
Right. So that
doesn't enhance any of them. It doesn't move any of those forward.
No. Maybe abundance.
Wow.
But 7 out of 8 are actively inhibited by drinking alcohol, as an example.
Right.
So,
I think that's a good point. And I think, not to say I'm not sitting here as a drug and alcohol counselor or anything of that nature, but I do think if anyone is struggling with something, that would be a good exercise, is to go through your values and to really get clear on what you value most and what you aspire to most, and then really ask that hard question, does this thing get me closer or further from that?
Yeah, and then then the next question is, how do you design processes to stop you from doing that? And like, tracking my behaviors worked well for me because I'm quite analytical, and like I like tracking things in the day-to-day, so that helped me to give up porn, give up drinking. You know, those were kind of tracked out, because the second you start measuring something, as you'll improve. Habit tracking was huge for a lot of these. Like vaping has been harder because I just don't feel as strongly. Like it's bad for your mental, physical health. It's bad for your integrity because it's something I would potentially lie about because I'm a little embarrassed by it. But not as disastrous as the other. So then it just takes better habits, like not having availability, like atomic habits type stuff. If it's less available, it's less satisfying, you'll do less of it. So you find a way.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've struggled with my weight my whole life and connected to very young exposure to porn, like very young, 9 years old, from someone close to me. And the process was somewhat similar in weight to say, I need to track what who I really am and think about my values and being, again, not judging anyone who's struggling with their weight because I know that there's a lot of factors, but I know that's not who I am and who I wanted to be. And so tracking those things and getting really clear that I want my outsides to match my insides, so to speak, and I want my actions to represent what I really believe. And it's interesting that you share all that, and I can relate somewhat. Again, not comparing to anyone's journey.
Yeah.
So,
and I think I understand from my fiance is a clinical psychologist, there are different types of trauma. You're talking about a specific event there, it sounds like, that's a capital T trauma, like something big. But everyone has like little t trauma, which is a series of things that if they think back on them, make them feel guilty or ashamed or other negative and generally unhelpful emotions, right? So everyone has something they're overcoming. Sometimes that leads to addiction, sometimes it's not. For me, it definitely did, and I'm ADHD, recent like diagnosed with that, so I'm 3 times as prone to addiction as other people, which I'm trying not to use as a crutch. That's a reason
that's
to
a good point
be even
too.
more.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because we can also have these physiological factors or these biological factors that make something more likely, and yet we also have to still find a way to overcome that on that pursuit, on that relentless pursuit of our best self. Were there any tools that you said the tracker you used? Oh, this is actually what I wanted to know. Did you have to cut any people out of your life? Did you have to, because I'm always interested in, because relationships can also keep us stuck on our growth journey, whatever that growth journey is. Was that the case for you, or?
You know what, if you change your lifestyle significantly, it just happens. True. So like when I took the decision to stop drinking, which had been a gradual process, I hadn't drunk 3 months out of the year. I'd taken 3 months individually off, and I went into 2024 saying I am going to do 4 months this year and 5 months the year after, and this will be a gradual. But I did dry January, did the whole month, felt amazing, and was like, why would I stop? Before then, the majority of my friends had been big drinkers. Most of those friends still are big drinkers, and I see a lot less of them. And that's just something if you're going to make a big life change like that. Yes. Ultimately, if I look back at it now, those people, some of whom, like, I just did my wedding list, right? That's a very who am I actually close to time, especially when you're having a small wedding like we are. And what I realized is most of what I had in common with the people from that time is that we loved drinking.
Like to party together.
Like to party together. And that was most of what we had in common. We'd very rarely talk about anything of depth. And after 3 or 4 drinks, you can't. And our friendship was more a factor of that we spent so much time together and had drinking as a hobby in common rather than anything else. So when I look at the people I'm close to now, they're much more value aligned because we've had to talk about real things and connect on a deeper level to make sober time together justifiable and fun. So I don't go to pubs anymore, which is the big thing here in London. Frankly, that environment is not interesting unless you're drinking. So Fair. The nice thing is it frees up lots of time, but yeah, if you're going to give up something that's core to your being and the way you've lived your life like that, you're going to change friendship groups, and it's going to
weed some folks out. Thank you for sharing on that, because again, I would venture that it's more than half of the population that struggles with some, I'll say vice. Maybe it's not always to the addiction level, but something that's holding us back from being our best. And I know I fit into that category. And so I just appreciate your vulnerability and transparency on that. Let's switch to, you've really been very entrepreneurial for your entire professional career. So you mentioned that you went door knocking. Bring us back to after that. Where did you take that wild set of skills?
Yeah, so I loved door knocking because it was a distraction from pain and because I was good at it and because that validation meant a lot of being good at something. Did that for 2 summers. One based out of London. It's even crazier because you have to pay for a visa, pay for your flights. You're already
It's
£1,000 or $1,000 in the hole before you even get there, and then you're doing a pure commission job. Madness. But 2 summers of that, decided not to go back. Did a summer pedicabbing around Edinburgh where I went to university. So that's like cycle taxiing, rickshawing,
Oh, yes.
making money for people in the back. But yeah, I needed a real job after that. So I applied to a whole bunch of sales jobs because having done door to door, I was like, I can
you
sell.
can sell, yeah.
I can sell. That's the one thing I knew. And ended up joining a company, the right company for the wrong reasons. Because I was like, okay, so I've got jobs with an investment bank and a financial wealth advisor and Procter Gamble, a random one I applied to because I saw it. But then I realized Procter Gamble at the time had more salespeople than anyone else in the world. They were the biggest sales organization in the world. And that was a cool narrative. I was like, okay, I want to start a business eventually. Why not start in the biggest in the world and then get smaller throughout your career? That was my thinking. And that worked out well, not because Procter & Gamble is an amazing sales organization. It's a very good marketing organization, but it's not focused on people like doing B2B sales as much. But it's just a great organization. People stay there their entire careers. I learned so much, was so supported, and moved around so much so I wasn't bored because they moved around every 9 months. And I would have stayed there for a lot longer if I was part of the Duracell brand. When
Does your geography move around or just your position? Were you moving around?
Yeah. So I started in the north of England, a place called Harrogate, which is a nice posh town. And then they moved me down to London. But it was more position, like I did account management. My first job was field sales, which hilariously they sent out to toughen up grads. And I was like, done door to door, 80 hours a week. I think I can handle 40-hour a week going to some pet stores.
Sounds rough.
Yeah,
Come on.
It was boring. Yeah. Oh, nice. I like it. Sorry. That was very
Thank you. Delayed reaction, but this is my dad joke.
Nice. I appreciate it. So, long story short, moved around, did like account manager roles to Poundland, negotiation over pennies with really experienced buyers, Booker, UK's largest wholesaler. Then I moved on to Duracell and I actually sold that brand while I was on it. So I left Procter Gamble for that reason. Had 2 more big corporate jobs. One with Gartner, which is a really cool organization that does B2B sales incredibly well. They literally wrote the book on it. They bought the company that does the Challenger Sale and the Challenger Customer and Jolt.
Right.
This series
that changed my life. Yes.
It changed my life as well. We can talk about that in a bit. But always, so one of the things that book made me want to do was join the company that wrote it. Because I was like, I want to learn. Anyone who does big data studies like that, I want to learn how they think about things. And I want to sell Challenger to organizations as a challenger, because that's how I'm wired. And so I did that, but I didn't get put in the sales division. So I sold risk and audit solutions to big companies in South Africa, which is a baffling part of my career. And then I joined a news service and realized there was a gap in the market for a financial news service focused on real estate in the UK and potentially Europe. And that was the first venture I founded.
Okay, let's talk Challenger for a second, and then I want to talk about the one you founded. So what about Challenger changed your life?
So I read that book when I was at Procter & Gamble, and I was like, that's awesome. I am a challenger. I am disagreeable.
See that?
I like correcting people and teaching them things.
That's just British.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Sarcasm, opposing as challenger behaviors. And so I'm good at tailoring. I've always been good at taking in the information people give me and giving it back to them in a way that they would want to be presented to. And I have no problem closing a deal once I feel like it's right for both sides. So given I do all those things that top performers do, I need to go work in a B2B sales industry where the top performers are and be a top performer. And that's a very clear path for me to make lots of money and be very successful and have a great time and fuel my drinking habit at the time. And which turns out working in the city of London does all those things. And
checks all the boxes.
So yeah, it was impactful. And I applied to this company, CEB, that wrote it, which was acquired by Gartner, the big tech advisory company. And the first time they said, no, go get some B2B experience. So I went somewhere else and worked there for 18 months. But I was determined. I had in my mind, I want to work for this company. My friend who worked there, amazing time, amazing training, amazing products, selling information, 60% net profit margin, which is helpful. Because if you work in a high profit margin business, then you'll get treated better and there'll be more of the pie to go around for everyone rather than Procter Gamble, which is working on an 8% net margin. It's crazy. It's more
Products
fun to work in a
versus
profitable
services.
business. Exactly.
Yeah.
Intangible products versus physical products, stuff like that.
So,
Anyway, yeah.
I was the only job I ever applied for that I didn't get. I was in the interview and he started asking me about how do I get clients? And I went on and on about how I love to be friends with my clients. I'm social and they're my buddies. And it's true, if you know me on the disc profile, I'm an I, or we call it an entertainer mostly, unless I'm stressed out. But so I go into this very entertainer type response, and entertainers have a high need to be liked. We want to be liked, guilty as charged. And so he said, what do you know about the Challenger sale? And I was like, tell me more. I'm not sure. And he says, basically, of these 5 groups, those people are dead last. And man, did that just whop me upside the head with a 2x4, because I was just, one, it tongue-tied me. I really didn't know how to respond or recover after that. 2, it was sad. I thought I was doing a great job. And so I read the whole study and I went into the research behind it. And it's so true that the best salespeople, it's not just about being contrarian. It's really about asking tough questions and maybe risking you may not be liked, but you can't move forward if the tough question isn't asked. And so I would argue it's very high emotional intelligence, because you're recognizing they don't get out of this line of thinking, they're going to stay where they are, and that isn't serving them. So it was, I started to learn from that. I still am an entertainer through and through, but I think I'd like to think I've learned some of those EQ and challenger type questions and processes, but it was a blow initially.
Absolutely. Different way of thinking. I guess there's 2 ways of thinking about it. One is, sometimes in business, you need to choose between being liked and respected.
Yes. Yeah.
Which one are you going to choose, and which one's going to be, you're going to be more effective in business, and sometimes in life. You have different relationships, right? But sometimes being liked and having great relationships is all that matters. Other times, you need to be able to be firm for someone else's benefit, and people lose sight of that. But also, it's a double-edged sword, right? So there's a great Harvard Business Review study, probably 40 years old now, that looked at good salespeople, and they're an 8 out of 10 on ego and an 8 out of 10 on empathy, which I think is a great way of looking at it, because when I have gone wrong in this is when I have overreached. I've literally done this in a business process now where I've asked tough questions that I didn't have the rapport to ask, and they've been like, go away. But that only happens 5% of the time. The other 95% of the time, I do it pretty well, enough that I'm in that, understand the empathy, and people answer my tough questions, and their answers change the way they think, and they make better decisions, whether or not that's to buy what I'm selling or not. Most of the time it is, because our product's fucking fantastic. But
we're going to talk about that
too. Yeah. Designing good products has been a big part of my entrepreneurial journey, because I don't like selling things that I have conviction in.
Right, so, that helps.
And nor does anyone. But so if you have the right amount, just to recap, if you have the right amount of empathy and the right amount of ego, then you can do these things. You can ask tough questions and be respected, always liked, and you can do it in an empathetic way where you bring the person along on the journey in the right way.
It's almost like they have to match, right? If you have too much empathy and not enough ego, you're going to let people off the hook for BS excuses. I see this, work with a lot of folks in financial or life insurance. You see this a lot there, just really anything, but you see it a lot in those industries. If you have too much ego and not enough empathy, you come off like an a-hole. And so you need them both to match and help you maximize both, because people will open up based on the empathy, and then you can ask the tough questions based on the ego. So that's really cool. Tell me, so you started to talk about your very first venture on your own. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'd always wanted to start my own business, partially because I wasn't always a great employee. Being drunk a lot didn't help, but like I was tolerated in organizations because of my performance level, as opposed to my behaviors and socialness. I think generally I wasn't actually particularly well liked, but I was respected because of my performance. So I was like, 2 things. One is, if I'm not built for corporate life, and it was more just because I had these mental blockers around that, then I wasn't built for it. If I feel an outsider in the corporate world and I know that I can be a top performer in anything I do, if I set my mind to it and it's the right product I'm selling, etc., why don't I do that for myself in some way? Because most of the people I admire and like and hear about started their own businesses. So that was something I was going to do no matter what. But I almost did it early in my career in pet food, which would have been a disaster, like very commoditized category, and doesn't actually involve D2C selling really. And then dallied with some other ideas, but like when it hit me that a real estate news service was a real gap in the market, which almost got me in some trouble with my previous company, I was like, okay, I'm doing this. So I went out and I talked to a bunch of journalists in the market, and I found some people who everyone consistently said were the best. It took about 2 years of meeting, warming each other up, getting comfortable with the idea that we were going to do this together, getting to trust each other. There were 3 or 4 people who were potentially involved in the business and then fell away. But in the end of us, 4 of us, myself and 3 journalists, took the plunge and raised $300K for some friendly investors who also gave us office space, and for a little too much of the company, but a great deal in retrospect. And yeah, took the plunge into starting our own thing without really knowing what we were doing.
I love that. And what I want to highlight there is it took you essentially 2 years of just ideating and meeting and building and gaining support and getting feedback. I think that's a critical piece that people want to jump into the entrepreneurial pool, but they want it now. And sometimes I'm sure that there's stories out there where it did happen now, but largely it's kind of like what Malcolm Gladwell talks about in The Tipping Point, that the overnight success usually has years prior of just pouring the foundation. And I love that highlight of that part of it. You said it was in the real estate space. What specifically were you guys doing in the real estate space?
So I mean, the business still exists. It's now called Green Street News, which is the UK and European arm it also has a US version. It's a really big company that eventually acquired us. Great company, does a lot of real estate data analytics, that sort of thing. Yeah, so worth looking up. And so we reported on the biggest transactions. Obviously, I didn't personally do that. I have no background in that, but I was selling our
As the
subscriptions.
journalists, yeah.
Yeah, so the journalists were finding out information that was first to market on buying, selling, lettings in the biggest buildings all throughout the UK and then eventually Europe.
And then expanded. I love that. So the 4 of you built this, and then at what point, how did you exit? How did that come about?
Yeah, so we built the company over about 18 months, and we'd gotten up to, I think, 12 people by then. It's something like that, maybe a couple more, and something like 8 journalists and 6 salespeople. And we just hired our first product person because we were like, probably our tech stack was almost
It's like a
incredibly
good
simple.
idea.
We should probably have someone looking after that. And we're humming along, doing really well. We got up at about 2 million of revenue, and all of it's subscription revenue for this. I don't think we realized how amazing that was for such a young startup. My journey with this startup has been much longer. We just actually reached that mark, but it's taken 3.5 years. And even that's a good result, right? So doing it in 18 months, we knew we were doing well, but I don't think we had the perspective on it. And then one day out of the blue, it shows that we're a small company because I was still picking up the main phone line on my phone. So someone calls the main phone line, I pick up, I'm like, hey, can I talk to the owner? I was like, you're talking to one of them. And he was like, my name's Paul, and I'm calling from a big US company and would like to have a chat with you guys about your business because we've done and they were actually a subscriber to our news service. So they've been evaluating us.
They'd been stalking you.
They do well in the real estate market. We were like, cool, are these guys competition? Whatever, we'll give them a license, who cares? Which is maybe a bit silly in retrospect, but again, we didn't really know what we're doing. And then we started serious talks, and we found
Was there a part of you that like, is this call for real, or were you just kind of in it? Did you doubt?
I didn't see any reason why it wouldn't be for real. We had already had talks with one other person about buying us, and we were like, it's too early, we're growing really fast, why would we do that? So I guess it was for real, but we didn't say yes to the meeting immediately. We did some research into them. We're like, actually pretty cool. We have a smallish UK presence, don't do any news. As things go, this makes a lot of sense. And then
what were the negotiations like with them? And how did you, obviously, if they're much larger than yours and much larger than you, there can sometimes
Yeah.
We can sometimes sell ourselves short in that scenario. Obviously, you have years of sales experience and not doing that, but I'm curious. Tell us a little bit about those negotiations.
Cool. I'll probably just characterize them in more general terms, just because I'm not sure of what I can and can't say. But so we weren't interested in selling at
Hmm.
first because things were going really well. Obviously, when someone approaches you and is like, we want to do news in the UK and Europe, we want to do what you're doing, which is why we're looking at acquiring you, you're like, shoot. So there's obviously going to be downside if we don't do this because they're going to become our competition and try and hire our journalists. And being fairly naive in running our own business as we were, we probably overweighted that side. So we were like, okay, so we've got two things. Either we go into competition with them or we let them buy us. We still said no a couple of times. And because,
A good
you know,
good negotiator would do that, play a little hard to get.
yeah, and we just, at first, we just didn't want to sell. So it was partially negotiation and partially just being honest. And then they just came back with they just asked us what we wanted. And then we said what we wanted, and they said yes, or a version of yes. Because obviously in these things, there's always like a portion which is cash, a portion which is like equity in the big company, or often there are. And then a period you earn over a certain number of years. And we just thought, okay, those are all about equal. They weren't about equal. Actually, the equity we ended up getting ended up being worth way more. And so we should have asked for more of that. And our earn out was over 4 years, which could have been really challenging for us all to stay. It's been 4 years now, and all the journalists are still with a bigger company. So they would have probably triggered all of that, but I probably wouldn't have because I'm not a great corporate soldier, or definitely wasn't at that point. So anyway, so earnouts are always something you should give a lot of thought to as an exiting entrepreneur, and we didn't give much thought to, or give some thought to, but not enough. Anyway, once someone comes back and says, "What do you want?" and you say, "This is what we want," and then they give it to you, you're fairly committed.
So it sounds like you felt like it was a win, and your three other partners, you all felt like, hey, we got what we wanted from this. That's awesome. Did you go into it when you were building it? Were there dreams of potentially having a big acquisition at some point, or was that not even really crossing your mind?
Honestly, can't remember. It's just such a blur, that
That's
early stage of so much adrenaline. I was definitely addicted to work at that stage, right? Because I was just
it's like a
loving
baby.
it.
You don't remember their first year very well.
Yeah, it was just a blur of doing deals and fear of it all going wrong. I don't think we really pulled our heads above the parapet and thought, wow, what we're doing here is pretty cool, very much for the first 18 months or so. We were just starting to do a bit of that and a bit more strategic thinking. And should we engage with some consultants to help us shape how we should actually grow this business and how to employee options work, and are we giving the right amount and to who? These were all very early stage thoughts for us, and then this all happened. Yeah.
So what did you do next? You get your cash, you get your equity, you get
Yeah, some of it's upfront and some of it you keep if
unwind.
you stay. Yeah.
So you start unwinding the ball of string, and then where does Jamie go next from there?
Yeah, I think it's worth saying that this is the ultimate first world problem, or the first thing to cry about. But exiting a business is really hard. Really hard. And
it is kind of like a baby. A lot of people talk about
exactly
this.
like a baby. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, poor rich entrepreneur, right? But then the first year was awesome after we sold, because Green Street held React News, our company, separately. We had a big target to go after. We hit that target almost exactly. We had a great time while doing it. And then the next year, we were absorbed into the bigger organization, which is, again, a great organization. And I don't think it'd be bad to say about them at all. Awesome people, awesome company, just big, right? Just big processes. And that was much tougher. And I think that 7 months that I lasted, that was among the toughest of my life. I felt very stressed. I was drinking a lot. I was going out a lot. I didn't feel connected to the team. I felt like I was letting people down in various ways. But
was there like a mourning, like a sense of loss?
100%. And a sense of, yes, and a sense of clinging to the feeling of importance and complete congruence you have when you're building a business. That's the real fun thing about building a business. Everything is aligned in many ways. Everything you're doing is contributing to the value of the business, which is contributing to you personally, which is contributing to the people you're hiring. You and the business are the same thing. There's
Mm.
no, oh, the business did
Right.
this. You would, there's no, like, obviously, when you have a manager and they do something you don't like, there's nothing you can do about that. But if you own the business and you run the business or you're leading the business, then anything you don't like is you. So that control is great.
Right. And for many
Um,
entrepreneurs, they're eat, sleeping, breathing. It's 24/7 on their mind. It's 24/7 consuming, particularly in those early stages.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. So we exited. First year was pretty similar to being an entrepreneur. The second year was awful. Contributed some of my worst habits, not through anyone's fault but my own. I behaved very badly. And eventually I was asked to leave. Luckily, at the same time, the bigger business sold. So I got very lucky there. And coaching and therapy through that period were essential, but it was really tough because I missed that feeling of complete alignment with the business
so what did you do
and
with that?
importance.
How
Sorry.
did you go on?
And importance, like just how important you are when
Mm.
you're running a business. Like I missed that.
When it's yours and you're the top dog versus now you're.
And now you define yourself, right? You defined yourself for so
Mhm.
long by I am the commercial co-founder of React News, and now I am middle management at Green Street. Like it's just, and then yeah, that kind, yeah, not controlled and not, and I wasn't ready for it. That can lead to some awful behavior, which I really regret.
I've been having some talks with folks who've been trying to acquire businesses, even just small local businesses from these 60, 70-year-olds. And we're seeing that phenomenon of them not wanting to let go. It's their baby. And again, we're not talking like selling to private equity or anything. We're talking about selling to maybe just another, but there is a phenomenon out there of people not wanting to let go of their businesses because they don't want to lose. They're not saying, hey, I don't want to lose a piece of myself. They're not saying, hey, I'm scared but when you really peel back the onion, that's a lot of what's happening. There is an identity component when you have built something, whether you built it to 1 million or whether you built it to 100 million, there's an identity component. You going through that feels perfectly normal. How did you cope with that after the behavior and after the drinking? What finally led you to turn a corner and what did you do next?
Yeah, so I took 6 months out and did a bit of traveling and a bit of moping. And I realized that I am the kind of person who, without a cause and a purpose of building something, isn't going to be as happy. Or I have, especially having experienced that in the finding product
Yeah.
market fit, accelerating, yeah, having a great time while doing it. So I needed to build something new. So then it becomes the classic question, which I think a lot of people have. Okay, you want to build a business, probably can't be in the same sector because for a few reasons. One, just sold
Yeah.
the business that sector, and that makes it
For
more
legal
challenging. And
reasons. Yeah.
yeah, and the people who you worked with before don't want to work with you again because you've been an arse.
Bridges.
Real estate was out. So looked at some other news services, so what I basically did was the 0 to 1 thing, the whole PayPal mafia afterwards. What they did after they saw PayPal, Elon Musk and various other people, is they built 50 business ideas and they put them into binders and they did all the user research on them and made these into fully fledged ideas. And then they narrowed it down to the last 10 and they built those out into proper business plans. And then apparently, like I was reading articles today, apparently 8 of those 10 last ones have actually become businesses. Like one of them's
Oh my
Palantir,
gosh.
one of them's, yeah. If you do proper big market research and get these ideas to the point, and then they picked one of them, I should know the story better, but one of them is the one they did, and it's huge, whatever it is.
The big
Is
one,
it PayPal?
the massive
Maybe I'm
one that they
confused.
did.
It might be PayPal. Sorry, I might have that the wrong way around. They did something together and then they did PayPal. And PayPal
Okay.
was the idea that won. And then several of these other ideas were also winning ideas that were pursued by members of that group that did that whole exercise. So I did my own personal version of that. And I guess this is probably what I'd recommend for people who want to be entrepreneurial but aren't yet, is don't get too hung up on a B or a B plus idea, because that's a great way of wasting years of your life. Brainstorm lots of ideas and find the A ideas, and then do user research to check that these are A ideas, and don't be too wedded to any of them. And then once you find one that you're like, yes, A, I can do that, or me and the team can do that. B, this is a great idea that has a defensible moat and can be done. And all this is changing so fast with the price of tech going to zero that what may be a great idea 2 years ago isn't now. So don't be too wedded to any of this, and find the right idea that you can start at the right time. Sorry, that's a separate rant. But anyway, I did the same thing and shortlisted 50 ideas and made really good pitch decks for 10 of them, and LOXA was the idea that won.
And tell us a little bit about that, and tell us what you love about it. What got you excited?
So I get excited by big gaps in the market that can be hugely profitable businesses that can need a decent sized team, but not a huge team, that involve B2B sales. So my jam. And I was really looking for something that was a little bit more complex this time. Like, rather than the new service last time was great, but fundamentally it was a subscription graded blog. And then the actual content was amazing, but the product itself was simple, which all of that made it a great business. And there've been a lot of times when I've regretted feeling the need to do something really complex this time, because it has been complex. And the more moving pieces you have, like we have insurance backing and technology and regulation and claims handling, and there's a lot of different failure points. But ultimately, this came about because I just asked a friend, if you weren't doing what you're doing, which was in what's now a really amazing claims handling business for insurance that we work with, what other business would you found? He was like, it baffles me that no one's doing point of sale insurance for online SMEs here in the UK. And like Amazon does this and Argos does this, and the really big players here in the UK all offer protection, but no one in the like 10 to 500 million bracket does it. Like, what? It's a no-brainer. Why aren't they doing that? So we set out to do that, and we fumbled around for a couple of years, and then we finally got someone on the co-founding team who really understands insurance. Turns out, starting a business in insurance
sounds like that's a good idea.
And for some reason we just didn't do that. That like probably set us back about a year in total, and made it quite painful. But we're now there and accelerating wildly, and it's really fun.
That's awesome. And other than not getting someone on the team that was really embedded in insurance, what things do you look back on that you'd go, next time we'll shorten our learning curve because we know this now? Or what would you do differently? Yeah. What would you learn from?
Yeah, lots of things. I think that product knowledge on the lead team or the founding team is essential, and you should take the time to make sure you have that, rather than going into a domain and figuring out everything about a domain. I learned quickly, that's great, but like I've had to learn all of insurance or like all of this part of insurance within a couple of years, and make loads of mistakes along the way, and that could have been solved for. Another thing is, for a tech company, I would probably have try and find a proper technical co-founder. A lot of time in these ventures, like finding who you know who could do this with you but I would have networked harder to find that person. Funnily enough, I no longer believe you need that. So this is a lesson from 2 years ago. Now, like vibe coding is so good that you can have a product person as a co-founder and they'll be absolutely fine because they can do the coding. So, but that was a lesson 2 years ago.
Right.
And then, but now I guess the bigger lesson is like, who's on the bus? Who do you need to do this? And maybe take a little bit longer.
Classic.
The last venture for React News, I wanted to just launch with 1 or 2 journalists. And was like, why can't we just do this? Why can't we just start with who we have and then we'll recruit some more? And the other guys were like, no, we need at least 3 to do the volume we want to do. And that ended up being the right decision, even though that we started 6 months later. We had the right team on the bus. So that's worth doing. The other lesson I learned is hire for your business stage and your budget. Don't hire people who are ahead of that. Or so like, we have a very young team. We don't pay big salaries at this business stage. A lot of our conversations in equity. 2 things. The kind of person who wants that is the kind of person you want, because they're truly bought in, because they only succeed and make money if the business succeeds. Whereas we had some high salary people early on because we just raised some money. And we were like, oh, let's hire some high salary people. High salary people are not the people you want in a startup, because they're going to be
startup culture is totally different.
You want people.
It's young, scrappy, around the clock, and it's a very different. I've seen people make that mistake where you're right, you need some depth and breadth of experience, but at the same time, you need that startup culture feel for people to really and just be ideating and building and sinking their teeth into it around the clock. That's interesting. And on the coach side, I've seen it before. So what are the ways that AI is impacting your business, the world? What are you seeing right now? Because you mentioned one of them. You talked about 2 years ago, you might have needed someone who could do this, and now it's really easy for anybody. But what else are you seeing on the AI front? Because I'm fascinated. I'm just dipping my toe in the water, but lots of folks are far more in the deep end than I am.
Yeah, and I am quite in the deep end. So I thought we were going to go an entire podcast without talking AI, which would be wonderful, which doesn't happen in my podcast.
Sorry to
Don't
disappoint
worry.
you.
It's very exciting as a non-technical person to be able to do a lot of things that would have required a high level of high level of technical sophistication previously. It's not at the point where I, as a non-technical person, could be the technical co-founder. You just always need to be technical, at least in the way you approach and spec things. But it is at the point where I can do a lot of things myself, where I really needed support. And the people who think in the right way, usually who've studied science or done some technical development or done some product management and creating specifications for how things are built, that they can just now do the build. Maybe not check the build,
Right.
maybe not make it secure, but do it. So you need a lot less to start a business because you can have a product very quickly, which is key because you want to do a lot of user research and make sure it'll actually work. But it means that it's going to be a lot more saturated with people who are floating early stage ideas. And it means that the things that are going to be really valuable in a co-founding team will be more around the soft skills, which I think they always have been. The ego and empathy, which allows you to fundraise and convince people to buy a product and that. And execution. If anyone can do anything, who are the people who are going to follow through, put in the hard yards, do the user research interviews rather than just sticking a product out there, sit down and actually talk to people and stay close to their customers as opposed to sitting in an ivory tower and iterating what's going well. What difference AM making? AM is making tech a lot cheaper. It's making good tech people individually much more expensive because they can do the job of 5 people. It is making it so that tech as a competitive advantage no longer works to raise investment, because if you say your moat is tech, people will say people can build that in 3 months now, which is true of all of our tech.
What isn't not tech?
Yeah, exactly. You need your moats and why people can disrupt you to be something else. That could be your relationship, your brand, your distribution, your user experience that is imprinted in people's brains, or Amazon hasn't updated their front of house for 10 years because people are so used to it, not because it's good, right? There's all these other, but ours is, we're lucky because, and I obviously didn't have this foresight when I started the company, but the fact that we're regulated, the fact that we need insurance backing, the fact that this kind of company is very difficult to set up, because for all those reasons, and having funding and customers and insurance and all this stuff at the same time is really tough, means that we are not going to be disrupted, fingers crossed, in the same way that a lot of tech and SaaS companies are.
Certainly not as quickly or as easily. One thing we haven't talked about yet, your book. I love this. I love it. The Exceptional Sales Career. When did you start writing? And I want to say, they say that everybody has a book in them, but so few people get it across the finish line, which is one of your points from just a second ago of that's going to be a lot of people's differentiator is what is our follow through. And my hat is off to anyone who truly follows through. Particularly, can you guys see how thick this is? This thing is substantial. And it's filled with incredible sales tips and ideas and interviews and stories. What was the brainchild for this? And what led you to not only start it, starting's the easy part, but actually bring it all the way home?
So I think this was like a starting a business thing, but in book form. I had just started a business and I was like, okay, the next logical thing is I want to write a book. And so I actually did this while building React News, which is, of course, crazy timing. So it was like COVID and lockdown, and so we had lots of time on our hands. So I did lots of book writing. I actually went back to Bermuda where my family home is.
Jamie likes to be busy.
Yeah. If you want something done, give it to a busy person. I want to distract myself from having to think about things. Yeah, I wrote a book while starting a company, which is, of course, silly. But the big benefit of this book, so I want to be up front and say, I don't think it's a very good book. I've only reread it once since I wrote it. And it's got loads of quotes from brilliant people in there. But I think the problem with it the online version was better because I also built a website. That's how high effort I am. Back when it was tough to build websites, and all the editing is done by hand because it's pre-AI. There was a
This
mental
is
amount of work to
pre-AI.
build this
He
book.
built a website for his book, so he put the
And
muscle
edited
in
these
it.
books by hand. Like had a team of 4 who would get together on Sunday nights and like actually edit documents, like to go through typos. It was crazy. So you still go to the exceptional sales career and see the output of all that effort, which is underwhelming for how much effort went into it. And so I say this all honesty, like this is a good example of me feeling compelled to do something and not like scoping what I wanted the outcomes to be. And so while I do think it's a good book and worth pausing and has some amazing people in there, because you don't know the people, you obviously do know a lot of the people, so it's more meaningful to you.
I know some of them, yes.
You know, some of the people. So that kind of brings it to life. But otherwise, it's just a bunch of quotes from people who you don't know. And I think that's challenging for the human brain to empathize with. So because I didn't have clear outcomes, I wrote a book that was really long because I wanted to get lots of information in there. And the process was amazing in that I interviewed 110 sales leaders and became super close to those people as a result, which is one of the things I love about running a podcast now. So I did a rundown of this. Like of the 110 people I interviewed, I have now worked with 7 of them. Like either one as a co-founder and the others like I've employed them. A couple of them were from previous lives as well, so they were my managers. And I have invested in companies of 5 of these people I've interviewed, and 6 of them are my investors in this current company. And like a couple of other lifelong friends,
So it's
Dave
your
Brown, who I've met
fundraiser.
before. Yeah,
It's your partial pitch
close to
deck.
people. It's getting close to people.
Yes.
When you interview people, when you spend time like we are now, you get closer to people and you know each
Well,
other.
I think it's a great book. There's lots of great nuggets. I do hear your point that a lot of you may not know who the nuggets are from, but there's gold and there's wisdom in people who've done the thing. And that's a lot of what your book just brings home is people doing the thing and what did they take away from it, which I obviously absolutely love. That's why we do this here. But
I really appreciate that, and I should maybe be a bit nicer to my book or about my book. But
you should.
yeah, it was a labor of love, and I probably undersell the outcome.
It's a great book. Let me just say it one more time. Jamie, last question, because I know we've just been having a blast here, but last question is you really are relentless in your pursuit of goals and vision and dreams. What inspires you? What motivates you? What can you share with others that they can infuse into their life to continue on their relentless pursuit?
Yeah, I guess if you're going to be relentless and you have to do something, there are 2 main reasons that you would need to do something. One is a fear of failure, like an away motivation. The other is a toward motivation. I have to do this because it's great, and the person I will be at the end of it is the person I want to be. And I have done most of my life in the former. I need to do this because if I fail, it will be a disaster and I will be stuck alone with my thoughts and I will not be important and I will not be validated and recognized. And it has been a huge revelation to me over the past couple of years, stopping drinking, doing the work, whatever you want to call it, that I've been able to be not fully, but more towards motivated. I.e., I'm really excited to build this business to 20 people and 50 million of revenue and have a great time doing it. And that will be in line with my values and joy and something I can share with my fiance, who will then be my wife, and our pets and maybe kids and whatever. And then that can bring a lot of joy to the people who are involved and can be a really good, long-standing business, whether I'm with it or not in 10 years' time. That has not caused me to work any less. And that has caused me to work in a much more sustainable, kind, thoughtful way. So I would recommend, even those people whose relentlessness is driven by fear, consider switching it towards motivation and becoming more excited about what they're doing rather than needing to work incredibly hard. Now that may backfire and you may not work as hard, but that's not what's happened with me.
I think that's absolutely brilliant, and incorporating a little bit of both is certainly a good next step for people if they feel like they're too fear too loaded on the fear side. So finding, which goes back to where we opened, which was talking about clarity of your vision and what you really want and who you really want to become is all toward motivated. So I think that is an absolutely brilliant nugget, pearl of wisdom. And it's been an absolute blast having you. Jamie, where can people find you?
Only social media is LinkedIn. Because
Okay.
I would find anything else far too distracting. So Jamie Hamer there, and yeah, feel free to email me at jamie.hamer@loxacover.com.
Excellent. And I'll put both those in the show notes. Jamie, such a blast. I learned something from you every time we chat and just impressed and inspired by the journey you've been on. And I'd love to have you back after you hit that, is it the 20 million mark?
Oh, that's a good question. So we'll be 50 million of revenue within 3 years. So we'll
50 million.
forward to
Okay.
being
Love to
held
have you back
accountable.
when you hit the 50 million mark. We're going to have you here again to tell us how you did it. Is that fair?
All right. Yeah. Didn't get to take it that far with the previous company, but will for this one.
All right. Cheering for you from the States. Thanks so much, Jamie.
Thank you for listening to Relentless Pursuit with Marjorie Dudley. If you want to build discipline, resilience, and results in your own work, that's what I help leaders and entrepreneurs do through coaching, speaking, and training. If today's conversation got you thinking about how you'd like to show up, you can find me through the links in the show notes. Until next time, stay relentless.